Hello everybody and welcome to this Searches UK webinar on burnout and risk management in the conveyancing sector. My name is Amy Bell. I'm a director of a business called Teal Compliance. We help law firms with the rules and the regulations that they need to follow. I'm joined by Leah Steele, who's a great friend of mine and also a real expert on these issues of burnout. Just before we get going, just some housekeeping. If you could type in the chat or the questions, just let us know whether you can hear us okay and whether you can see us, because we've got the cameras on, so hopefully you can see us.
I should probably speak at this point to make sure that everybody can hear me.
Just to make sure someone can hear, yeah, that would work.
This is the moment where we get very nervous waiting for the chat to come through, isn't it?
Yeah, we've got a hand up, so someone's put the hand up. Anyone want to say in the chat that they can see us? Oh, here we go. I can see and hear you both. Thank you so much, Stuart. That's brilliant. Okay, so this session is really a kind of a chat session. Lou and I have got a few areas to talk about where we want to talk about the observations we've been seeing and some of the things that we would say to law firms that they should be thinking about. As it's interactive, it's live, so do feel free to pop any questions in the question section or the chat section, and I will try and pick them up as we are going through. If there's anything in particular you'd like us to talk about, then please do let us know. So Leah, would you like to introduce yourself and then we'll crack on?
Go on then. Okay, so my name is Leah Steele. I am the founder of a business called Searching for Serenity. Through that business, I provide mentoring and training to private individuals and to companies all around stress resilience, burnout, imposter syndrome, and basically how we can help brilliant people like yourselves to all be more sustainable, have a more enjoyable career, and to have real longevity. My background is that I was a lawyer for 12 years for my sins. So I do understand where we're coming from, and the whole point of this is that our solutions are supposed to be practical and pragmatic. I'm not going to tell anyone that what they need to do is go on a break or kick the leaves or sit in a meditation pillow, okay?
Although that is, I do have a meditation pillow and I do like sitting on it and meditating, and it has helped me. But you know, I think the thing is, this situation that we find ourselves in, for me, I've been a solicitor for over 20 years. Worked in the law for 23 years, high street law firms and also very large law firms. And I don't think I've ever seen the pressure that there's been on the conveyancing sector that there has recently been. We've never had a set of circumstances like this, particularly whilst I have been, I'm told, I did do conveyancing back in my training contract back in the day, but for the last 9 years I've worked in compliance, so touched lots of different areas of law. And whilst I have been stamp duty kind of holidays and breaks in the past, we've never seen the same set of circumstances that has led to such a lot of money in the economy and such a lot of pent-up demand in purchasing property that I think has led to unprecedented numbers of conveyancing transactions and pressure. And that, I'm guessing you're nodding, that mirrors what you've seen and heard from people.
I mean, I came into the legal market 15 years ago this year. And so I came in just as we were all having changes in the legal aid processes, as we were having a crash in the economy, obviously the credit crunch, great time to start your career. And, you know, I've seen it the other side where, you know, so many people did not have work, but I've never in 15 years seen the volume, the expectation that has been placed upon conveyancers. And, you know, for the last couple of months, my LinkedIn feed has just been full of conveyancers saying, when is this going to stop? When is this going to end? How can we manage this? Because I think we also have this perfect storm of the expectations were not managed for conveyancers, were they? And so what we thought we had, we didn't. The rug got pulled out from underneath everybody quite quickly. So no, I've never seen, probably in any sector, barring maybe criminal law, this kind of high volume, low control, complete inability to forecast what's going to happen. And of course, the pressure that's been on conveyancers because of the economic gains of the SDLT holiday has been huge.
Yeah, and I think that the as I say, and you said, the circumstances that people find themselves in was you know, challenges existing prior to the measures for the holiday. One thing that I remember and being surprised about was speaking to a managing partner client of mine just before they announced the extension to the stamp duty holiday. And I'd heard a lot, I deal with a lot of managing partners, a lot of partners of law firms, compliance officers and things like that, who, you know, were really on the cusp of, you know, what do we do for the best? Do we switch off the tap and say we're not taking on any more work? Do we carry on? We surveyed actually some conveyancers just before Christmas, and 70% of the people that responded to our survey, their firms were still taking on work, in full knowledge of the fact that conveyancing can often take, and through no fault of the law firm itself, can often take 16 to 20 weeks. I think the national average pre-COVID was 19 weeks for a conveyancing transaction. You add in furloughs at banks, local authorities, getting your searches back and things like that has added to that pressure, and firms were still taking work on prior to the extension of the stamp duty holiday. And I did another little mini survey. I was talking to this managing partner and he said to me, well, Amy, of course, if we can carry on taking on work, that's great. We're in a pandemic situation. We don't know when work's going to keep coming in. We know that this is buoyant at the moment, and you know, there is this temptation to keep taking work on. And then he said, but my head of department in conveyancing is desperate for them to maintain the end of the period in March, because she wants to see an end to it. And we'd seen, especially for our survey before Christmas, people saying we've made promises to our families that when this is all over, we'll be present again. And of course, extending the period into June, and for many firms in the north particularly, which is where I'm from, you know, we still are in this period until the end, you know, because of the value of the properties around here. And I think that must have been really hard. I ran a survey just about a week before they extended it, and it was so close. I was really surprised about it. 53%, I think, of respondents wanted an extension, but 47 didn't. And I thought that was really telling as to how people were feeling about it.
Yeah, I did a similar poll, and of course, you and I tend to, between us, we probably cover both sides, because you deal with a lot of heads of team and partners, and I've got a lot of people who are working their way up their careers on my network. And again, I had a very similar split, because there were some people who were just saying, we can't get to this, we can't get it all done in time, let's have an extension. And there were some people who were like, I can't do this anymore. And that was in March. We've then extended to June. Now, of course, we also have the north-south divide here. I'm down south, if anyone didn't get it from the accent. And, you know, around here, the average property price starts, I think, around 260. So it's massively narrowed the impact. And I'm in the southwest. So obviously, the further east we go, the more the prices rise. But for you guys, anybody above Birmingham, essentially, we've got this continuing massive issue. And even here, we've now got this kind of backfilling situation going on, where the flats, where the smaller properties have been opened up, where the development properties have been opened up. It's an incredibly difficult situation, because I think when you can focus and say the end is in sight, I know what's going to happen, that's great. The problem that we have with that is, one, we have the extension. Two, we still have a second deadline. And three, even with the firms that I'm speaking to in the south, there has not been a drop in demand after the end of the SDLT holiday here, which logically you would think there would be, but it seems to have kickstarted other areas of the market anyway. So I've spoken to a number of people over the last 2 weeks who have said, I thought instructions were going to drop. They're as high as they were before. And in the run up to the deadline, I was hearing from firms who were performing as many completions in a week as they normally would in a month or more. We cannot maintain this pace.
No, and I think that, you know, what we're talking about today, from your point of view and my point of view, is from my point of view, that just generates such a huge amount of risk for the business. Yeah. We're in a position where the professional indemnity insurance market is continuing to harden. In the April renewal, I worked with Lockton, and they've done a report that said that firms that had no claims still had to suffer an increase in their professional indemnity premium. Some of that isn't, and no one in the sector has any control over some of the pressures that are causing those increases, but certainly underwriters are alive to these issues and are starting asking questions about how are you managing this risk going forward. How are you replacing, because of course, you know, the part of the reason we're in this unprecedented situation is because of COVID and the disruption to our usual way of doing things, not just the demand and all the extra cash in the sector, in the financial, you know, in the economy as a whole, but the fact that we're having to do things in a different way than we were set up to do as well. And I think that was the start of this pressure on conveyancers. We're very paper heavy, very office dependent. The team worked together in the team, and you had, you know, lawyers and support staff that were helping them move those things on. You send everyone home, which you had to do, and I think, you know, we're in a situation now where our daily numbers are shooting back up of cases. So even if people aren't getting seriously over COVID, the offices are being disrupted. You know, people are having to self-isolate within a team, even if you are back in the office. And this continues for, you know, at least another 6 to 12 months, I think, of potential office disruption. And all of our risk management strategies, file reviewing, supervision, all of this kind of stuff, we're all built where we could all see each other. And now they're not, you know, we're not seeing each other in the same way. And I think this is really sets the scene for as this pressure cooker, really, of situations we're in. So from my point of view, obviously, I speak to compliance officers and heads of department and things like that. And there are these pressures of trying to make sure that we've got everybody in, we've got clients being looked after. I know we're going to talk in a little minute about the pressure from clients, which again, it seems unprecedented to me. But in terms of the staff, are you hearing the same things I'm hearing about the staff really feeling that they haven't got strategy, they've not got tools in place to be able to deal with this pressure?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got people who I've seen people asleep at their desk on the Friday when the 5 o'clock when the SDLT deadline finished. There was one person who shared a picture one of his colleagues had taken. He's just leaned back in his chair and passed out asleep. 5 o'clock. I will apologise for anybody who can hear panting. My dog is next to me and I've got quite a sensitive microphone. I'm excited about this topic. I'm not that excited that I'm panting, okay? He's a large dog and he, has a lot to say on this topic as well. So I've seen people passing out at their desks. We're already seeing increased rate of absences because people were looking to book holiday. But of course, taking up to the deadline, that doesn't mean that everything stopped. It wasn't like everything got tied up with a bow on the Friday afternoon. We still have matters in progress. We still have matters that have run over. Frankly, we've got the volume of complaints for people who didn't get what they wanted, when they wanted, how they wanted. And it just feels like a Jenga tower. We've pulled more and more blocks out the bottom, trying to kind of cope and trying to reach to be able to manage it. And it's wobbling. And my concern is that from the staffing level, we've got staff who don't necessarily feel protected. Now, what happens when a staff member doesn't feel protected, doesn't feel they can speak up, doesn't feel that they have a voice? You know, everybody's busy, everybody's stressed, who am I to complain? Which we all have these narratives, unfortunately. What happens? We close down. We don't speak up when there's a problem and we can't get ahead of the issues. And that's before we take into consideration that in order to speak to somebody about it, you're probably going to have to book a meeting. You can't just go, oh, by the way, across the office at someone, or even if you can, they're so busy you don't want to interrupt them. We've got all of these spiraling issues that can really, really invest in that kind of shame, worry, and fear aspect of what we do. Because we're all perfectionists here, let's not pretend otherwise. We all want to do a brilliant job. We all want our clients to be happy. And when there is a risk of that not happening, that's when the wheels can come off really quickly. And that's my concern, that if staff are not feeling supported, if they don't feel they can speak up, if they don't feel that concerns around stress, volume, etc. are being listened to or have any real tangible outcomes, what we are going to have is more and more problems coming to the surface, and we're not going to see them for a while.
I completely agree. Very often when I'm looking at sources of claims or circumstances, reportable circumstances within a law firm, what we see as a common factor when there's multiple issues with a particular fee and a particular lawyer is these kinds of factors that not felt able to speak up, worried about the impact if they do speak up and ask for help. I think there's definitely cognizance of who can help me. I'm just putting this burden on someone else, and that's not helping my team. And also the firms, when I do see this, haven't necessarily got a proactive approach to just recognizing that people must inevitably be in this position. It's interesting because I'm not saying that people who have, I always say to firms, when you're thinking about who to look at, we use supervision and file reviewing as a strategy to check everyone's okay, but really file reviewing is a tiny proportion of anyone's caseload. It is literally finding a needle in a haystack to use that. And there are such a lot of other subtle signals that you can pick up on that give you a clue as to somebody is struggling. And I think I've seen so often people, progression through a law firm for solicitors and lawyers is really important. And so nobody wants to put their hand up and say, I'm not coping, I'm not. But we have to acknowledge that in this pressure that we're in, people will be feeling like that. And so some of the things that I think we'll get on to practical things, but some of the things that I recommend for firms to start trying to open up that conversation is from the top of the team. We all get things wrong. We know things are going to go wrong. If you tell us about it, we can sort it. About 90% of reportable circumstances don't go anywhere because they can be sorted out. But if we don't know about them, we can't sort them out. So really making it a safe place to put your hand up and say, I'm stuck. And I think that comes really from the top of the department. And things that I've seen work really well in law firms is what I call a bring out your dead meeting. On the basis that everybody has got 3 o'clock in the morning files. If you're listening to this and you don't know what I'm talking about, I'd be surprised, because everyone does know what I'm talking about with the 3 o'clock in the morning file, the ones that wake you up and you go like that in the middle of the night. I mean, I had my second flu jab the other day, COVID jab. I was telling you, wasn't I? And I was feeling a bit fluey, and so I had kind of nightmare hallucination things where I haven't been a Fiona since 2005. And I had a nightmare last week that I was fearing, and there was those files on the bottom of the shelf that you keep meaning to get to and you haven't got to. And I had a nightmare about that. And I woke up and it took me about 2 or 3 minutes to convince myself that I wasn't a Fiona anymore and hadn't been since 2005. It was so, so powerful, the fear.
I think everybody has heard my version of it, waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning thinking that I'd sent a particularly florid email to a client who absolutely would have deserved it, but still that would have been the end of my career. And it didn't take me 2 or 3 minutes, it took me about 8 hours, because until I checked my sent items, I could not confirm that I hadn't sent the email because the fear was so big. We all have these moments. We all have these, unfortunately, kiboshed weekends in my case. And anybody who says otherwise is frankly a liar. We all have it. We all have the fear. Or not paying attention. Oh, shouldn't start that line.
We do. And so bring out your dead meeting, which is what I usually say, is this is a way of the firm saying, listen, we all know you get stuck on things. Let's facilitate this communication point, this meeting where we can all go. I mean, it's great for giving people the confidence to speak up. I mean, I used to run them, and it was a rule. You had to bring a file with you. You couldn't just rock up to listen. You had to bring a file with a problem, knowing everyone had them. And it just demonstrated what a safe place it was to talk about these things, to say, I'm stuck and I'm stuck on this. Please, can you help me? Also a great learning opportunity for everybody else, because there will be something of value in that discussion. Somebody will, you will learn something. And the other thing that I have always advocated and did in practice was I had a buddy down the road, a lady that some people may know, she in the legal sector, called Claire Smith. We used to work down the corridor from each other, and I would go, and instead of leaving my 3 o'clock in the morning files gathering dust on the bottom shelf, we would just once a week pass in the corridor, swap files. You do that one for me, I'll do this one for you. Because what to me was a 3 o'clock in the morning file was just an email for her. I just had some blocker on it, maybe a difficult conversation with a client who was particularly demanding that I'd taken personally, and I was just like, I can't bear looking at that file. She would just do it and remove the blocker. So, you know, just being really honest about us having these problems as lawyers and making it a safe place. So have you got any other tips for how to do that?
So actually what you've been getting at there when you talk about it being a safe place is an entire area called psychological safety. And there are books and resources and workshops and everything written around it. Psychological safety is essentially the idea that I am safe in this environment, that we as a group are safe, and that we have created a culture of safety and security. Now, there's actually research to back that up. If anybody here has ever read the book Black Box Thinking by Matthew Syed, Amy knows I always talk about this one.
It's on my list for my summer holidays to listen to.
I've given you quite the list, haven't I? It compares and contrasts two industries. So if anybody has a friend in medical negligence, don't let them read this book, because we're talking about the medical industry versus the Civil Aviation Authority. But essentially the idea that under the Civil Aviation Authority, so long as you make a disclosure, full and open disclosure, within, I think, 10 days of an accident or a near miss happening, there will be no consequences, so that they can learn. And that is how they have created the greatest safety record of pretty much any industry going. So it shows the psychological safety that if I know there's going to be no immediate personal consequences to saying, hey, I might have messed up here. Well, first of all, we set the precedent that none of us are doing this deliberately. It's not that I'm stupid or malicious. It's simply I might have made a mistake. Let's deal with it. No blame, no shame. And second of all, what can we learn from it? And that's exactly what you've just been feeding back through. So this is an entire area that has massive research for it that actually most of us kind of do naturally. We know when we're feeling safe at work, when we feel that we can share, when we feel that will be supported if something goes wrong. But what we need to do is make sure that is signaled and created and curated amongst teams, rather than just saying, well, obviously that's the case. It's not obvious
And
until you've
sometimes it's
seen
a
it
bit deliberate.
demonstrated. Yeah.
Sometimes you have to like actually make an action point to do it, because we know what no one means to make anyone feel bad if they get something wrong. I have this in my own team. We try and practice what we preach. One of the things that I talk to firms about an awful lot is when you have had a problem come up, it's critical that the way you deal with it maintains that psychological safety, because we can get people who are like highly strung. I'm one of them, if I'm honest, you know, like, oh God, that happened. But I don't, that's not how I am with my team. We're like, hang on, nobody got up this morning to mess this up. No one did it on purpose. And one of the things that we often see when we're trying to understand why things have gone wrong and learn from it, which is super important, is that we can stop at human error. And this drives me absolutely nuts, because it's a given, it's a human error for me. When we're thinking about the causes of issues, yes, a person made a mistake because we're a business that's driven by people, but we're not getting, two things are happening if you get to human error. That does kind of lead to blame, because that's where you're stopping. You're like, oh, this is this human's error. That is the thing I talk about, and I chant it in my team, with curiosity, not blame. That's the position to adopt. Let's be curious about why this happened and not blaming. So I work with my clients and say, listen, human error, please cross that off your list of causes, because that won't necessarily be that. Somebody who's making a mistake on a completion matter that, you know, I touch wood, I'll touch some wood, that nobody listening today has got one lurking in their cabinet, right? But if you have got one, you're not doing it on purpose. If you have got one, especially given where we started this conversation, it's potentially because the workloads were higher than you'd be used to, than the system is able to cope with. And that there's a whole load of issues, homeschooling people, not working in the same way we used to work, not being able to have all the paper in front of you to spot the thing in the lease that you've, whatever it is, we might not know about it for now, we might not know about it for several years' time, but certainly nobody did anything on purpose here. The point is, let's be curious about the set of circumstances that created this. Was it a policy failure? Was it a non-compliance? Or was it a bigger thing than that? You know, it's a training issue. We've had to get people in very quickly to deal with this capacity. We've not had a chance to check out what they do know, what they don't know, and train them properly. And this is one of the areas. It's only in being curious about these things, two things really. Can we demonstrate to underwriters that we've learned our lessons? I mean, underwriters, nothing drives them more nuts than you saying it was a human error and that person doesn't work here anymore.
That should always be the first point for the investigation, not the end point. Human error, duh.
Okay, yeah.
How, why, what can we do?
I like 5 whys. I mean, there's lots of root
Mm.
cause analysis processes out there. I personally am a fan of the 5 whys because it's simple. I am a simple creature. So 5 whys is really quite straightforward. It was developed in Japanese motor engineering to try and understand why something wasn't working. The theory is that there are many contributing factors, but also that we are very quick to stop at our reason. So human error for me is a given. We cross that off and then go, why did that happen? So why was a key date missed? A key date was missed because it wasn't put in the diary. Why was it not put in the diary? Well, that could be a number of different reasons. The person wasn't trained. The person was too busy. The person was off sick. There was too much to do that day. It's only by keep asking yourself why you're actually going to get to the nub of the issues.
Yeah.
And by doing it 5 times and having discipline about doing it 5 times, you're not going to kind of cop out too early, really.
Yeah.
You're actually going to have a real wealth. And the real benefit of doing this is that you start to gain a statistical evidence base for why you have to change things. If you have got a team and you've got 17 different fee earners and 5 of them actually had the same why, is probably a systemic issue in the business rather than that particular person. And if we just say, oh, that particular person made a mistake on that particular day, we're not getting to the real cause of these issues by doing it. So yeah, there's loads of different processes out there, but my favorite is the 5 whys, because you can't really go too wrong. You just say, why did that happen? And then why did that happen? And you fill in the answer, and then you start to gather that data, and then you can make a case for change.
Yeah, and I think it's very, very easy in this industry in particular, because we are perfectionists. What we want to do is hold responsibility and hold blame at arm's length from ourselves. So it's easy to say, human error, they don't work here anymore. Okay, does that mean that you will never make that mistake ever in your life? Yeah, right. So that's why we need to learn from it. That's why we need to develop from it. And that, again, it links back to that previous point on psychological safety, that when we have an environment where people can speak up and make mistakes, it's because we understand that it's only by making mistakes that we can learn and grow from them and improve the process and make sure that people don't have to go through this again. So my approach with clients is always, we have to speak up. We have to have these discussions, because actually what you're doing, a little bit of a fear and a little bit of a worry, but you're saving potentially dozens of other people from making that mistake. So how many people are you helping by speaking up, by doing something about it? And that, again, it takes an element of courage and it takes an element of trust and support in your teams. But that is where this top-down sharing where it's gone wrong, sharing where it's gone right as well, and how we can learn and grow and improve from it is so vital. Because once we've got the process that a mistake is something that happens, we deal with it, we make sure it doesn't happen to other people again, and we move on.
Amazing. And I have a client that does sends and is like kind of quarterly newsletter. He has a section in it, what's gone wrong. Yeah. So he literally is sharing with the whole business. These are things, it's anonymous. They don't point out, name the lawyer it happened to or anything, but he shares the circumstances of what's gone wrong. The reason he does this is not just for the learning, but for the very visible proof that people get things wrong and we haven't sacked half the staff. You know, we've shown it. And I do think this from the top is really, really important, this cultural issue. One of the things that I think you're alluding to it there about having to be brave, one of the things that I find myself very often recommending to law firms that they look at, it's not something that we do, but having difficult conversations with people. I remember I used to be a learning and development manager. I used to run that for a large law firm. And I remember everybody asking me for dealing with difficult client conversations, and we're going to come on to dealing with clients in a minute. And I remember talking to someone who ran these kind of courses who refused to call it dealing with difficult clients, because that was almost passing the buck to the client and absolving us of any, it's not our fault that we can't have this conversation, it's because they're a difficult client. I tried to reframe it from that to say the important thing is that you know how to have difficult conversations and that we don't put them off. The amount of issues that I've seen where managers have struggled to talk to people that they manage about, give them effective feedback, which would have avoided some of these issues if they had have done it earlier. But it works the other way as well, which is facilitating people within the business at any level within the business to be able to give feedback in a safe way. And that isn't a given, that is a skill, I think, that we have to help people to have.
Yeah, and the reason why I'm laughing is because you don't know this, but one of the very first courses I wrote 5 years ago now was difficult conversations and colleagues. Because if you're going to say it's the clients that are difficult, well, I used to be a contentious probate lawyer. You know, clients are bereaved and have background problems and struggle. They're all going to be difficult if that's the way you want to term them. But it was actually more important how you can have those conversations with colleagues. And so that's why I was slightly laughing, because you're absolutely right. It has to be how to have a difficult conversation with anybody, but more importantly, how we can have it within the firm. How we can say, for example, no, I've got too many files, I can't take on anymore, I'm a risk, rather than being, oh, I'm a risk, oh, that's a problem, I can't possibly say that. No, you can say, this is going to be a problem if you continue this way, and I have to make sure that my brain is my product, and that I have the ability to continue to do this work 10 years from now, not because I'm meeting an immediate need. Again, it's a difficult conversation, but it's important to have it. It's important to have that clarity.
And from if you're a manager, if you're a leader in a law firm, just again, going back to the honesty, we need to be better as an industry at having these conversations with each other. People, it's interesting, I did another little mini poll not so long ago. I'm writing a book about compliance that works, and I was just testing out a hypothesis I had, which was, why did lawyers become lawyers? And my hypothesis was that we all wanted to help people. Funnily enough, that wasn't the top answer on Amy Bell Family Fortunes. It was actually, the top answer was the intellectual challenge of law was why most people became lawyers, and helping people.
You could say the money, always the money, right?
No, where is the money? Where's the money?
Where is the money?
Where's all this money we were promised when we decided to be lawyers? But we certainly, have got, it was about, I think it was about 43% was the intellectual challenge. We certainly didn't become lawyers, a lot of us, to become great people managers. That wasn't on the job spec. Nobody really told us that was part of the gig, if I'm honest. It was, no. This is how you apply it to a situation. This is how you deal with clients. And bringing it back kind of to compliance, when you start looking, if you are a solicitor, you look at the competence framework, delivering difficult conversations and the relationships you have with other with the colleagues is a competence. You literally have to have that competence, and if you don't feel that you're able to do that, that is a training need that you should have. And I think we'll get on to in a little while how does a firm build this program, because I think one thing that we share is this is not about lip service, it's about really doing stuff. I'm about compliance that works, and you're about well-being that works, not just a tick in a box that you've put something on. But just before we get on to that, I did want to just come back to the client thing. Having said we're not going to say they're all difficult clients, and that's the get out of jail free card, but there are very difficult conversations we have to have with clients, especially in the conveyancing sector. Whereas I don't know if your LinkedIn feed's the same as mine, but the kind of pressure between the law firms and then every other actor that the client comes into contact with, mixed messages and expectations. I saw one last week. We're past the deadline now, and I saw one on Friday where somebody had told maybe the financial advisor had told them they'd be able to take advantage of stamp duty holiday. I'm like, but it's already gone. And I think I've just seen this increase in friction really between people saying to their clients, oh, it's your lawyer, speak to your lawyer, and the lawyer's going, I'm doing my best. Can you, if I didn't have to take all these phone calls from clients reassuring them that I'm doing my best, I could actually be doing my best. So what do you say to people where the pressure they're feeling is not from the firm necessarily, it's from the relentless client contact that they get in some cases, especially as we've got 24/7 emails next to your bed, first thing in the morning, last thing at night, and what kinds of things. I know you don't approve that. I work with Leah and she's like, get your phone out of your bedroom so you cannot check your emails. But you know, this is for us, we live to serve clients. This is what is we're told is our you know, vocation, is to serve clients, and yet we cannot necessarily meet their expectations. So what boundaries can we put in play?
Oh, she threw out my keyword. She threw out boundaries. Right, this is getting serious now. Okay, so I think the first thing is that as an area, one of the big learnings to take forward from this is that a lot of people do not understand conveyancing and how it works. Full stop. We have had relentless phone calls, and yes, of course, we had somebody stirring the pot by telling their thousands and thousands of subscribers to contact your solicitor every day because they won't look at your file unless you do. Thanks. That's not true, first of all. But there is a real lack of understanding about some of these processes. Now, being able to sit down and roadmap for your client, this is what's happening next. These are the likely timeframes. These are the key points where I'm going to come back to you, is something that every firm that does conveyancing should be putting in place some kind of core document to be sent to their clients if they don't already right now, because clients get confused, clients don't know where they are in the process, and that makes sense. You've got a power differential. We know what's going on. We're trained to do this. They're paying us, but they don't necessarily understand what's going on. They don't know where they are in the process. They don't know what to be scared of and what not to be, so they're scared of everything. And so we can minimize that level of fuss, that level of noise, by education, by helping people to understand. So that would be the first thing that I'd be saying. We need to not just keep having these conversations where we say, and the next thing is, and the next thing is, but to have a full roadmap, to be able to say to clients, you can point to point 4, that's where we are right now. I'm waiting for this. That's when I'll be able to come back to you. I expect it to be this time. And if you give people clarity, knowledge, timeframes, then you should be able to manage. But of course, we can't do that when we're under the cosh all the time. And we're constantly having to, it's like taking a classroom and teaching each child the same thing over and over again. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that our clients are children, but it's that education and understanding point for anyone who misquotes me. That's more difficult. So we need this group impact, right? The second thing around this is we need to be able to create more of a support structure for the talent, the lawyers. You know, if lawyers are going to be on the phone 24/7 answering queries or reassuring people or telling them that, yes, I'm doing my best to get you over the line in time, and they're now, as my LinkedIn feed has been telling me, working in the evenings because they can't get the job done during the day, that is not manageable or sustainable. And that, again, if we weren't all so stressed out, so tired and in fight or flight all the time, that would be the red flag for managers to go, whoa, 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 we need to do something differently here. We need to take people off phones. We need to get help answering queries. We need to have something. But we didn't. We were like kids at the television. We were so up close to the glass, like there's a little nose imprint on it, and we can't see anything but pixels. So again, it's that now we have an opportunity to take a little step back, even just for a moment, and say, what didn't go well? How are we going to change that? And again, it comes back to that point we were saying about it's not human error. That's the starting point. Obviously, it's human error. We're running files. But what went wrong? Where are the commonalities and where can we make improvements to support people? Because it was just a completely unmanageable situation that so many people were fielding emails and telephone calls between 9 and 5 and then doing the decent work 6 till 10. Does anybody do decent work at 10 p.m? Present company excluded, obviously. So it's a big problem as far as I can see, that we have not taken the cues. So I say we, all of us have not taken the cues so far to say, whoa, 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 this is not working. Put a pin in it for a moment. We need to take a breather and we need to do this better. And that's a process that we need to implement moving forward.
And I think law firms are having to, you know, if they are getting any respite at the moment, particularly, but generally law firms are at a really interesting place in that they are we've still got a pandemic, and we're seeing a lot of people who are reevaluating what they want their life to look and feel like after this. I wrote at the very beginning of the pandemic, I wrote a working at home policy. And the reason I wrote it is because most of the ones I'd seen prior to that, working with law firms, the majority of them were couched in working at home is the exception to the rule, and these are the things you're going to have to prove that you can do safely before you'll be able to do it. And then of course lockdown came, and suddenly, well, let's rip that one up, because we're going to take it as a given that you can work at home, and we're going to have to work out how to do it, you know. So everybody's previous working from home, flexible working policy was not really fitting the circumstances we found ourselves in. And so I wrote one, and if I'm really honest, it took us quite a while to write one, because, you know, you've got to get that balance right between right away from you can't do this and there'll have to be a special case if you're going to let's really now think about how we're going to do this en masse, how we're going to deal with recycling, how we're going to deal with passing files between people if they need to have paper, how we're going to get people to finally go paperless or paper light, so that they can do this. How do we stop them printing, you know, sending it to their own email address and printing at home? How do we make sure the information's confidential in the house when, you know, the children and whoever and their partners knocking around? All of these problems we had to solve. And I think that I was saying before about supervision and file review, and I think a lot of firms probably, especially in conveyancing, with the pressure that's been on, have put that to the side.
No time.
And one of my clients said, and she knows that I quote her on this because it stuck with me so much. We were talking about training that she had planned during the pandemic, and she said, Amy, if I ask any of my lawyers to take an afternoon off to do training, it will be the straw that breaks the camel's back. So in terms of like business as usual compliance activity, training, file review, supervision, I think that's slipped, has to change. And my question at the moment is, you know, everybody is interested in hybrid working, which seems to be the new name for flexible working, but hybrid working is the new name. Can we ever get it to work? How do we go about getting it to work in our businesses? That's the question on everyone's lips. Have you got any thoughts about how to build a hybrid, how to build your business going forward that caters for the demands of the business as well as the well-being of the people working in it?
So I think at this point, when we talk about hybrid working, it is really easy for all of us to try and reach for the fancy solutions. We want to add the things that we think are going to have huge value. Let's get the Slack channels, let's get the Teams calls going, let's do our Zoom pub breakout, blah, blah, blah. And actually, it's the other way around. It's the basics that matter. We've already talked today about psychological safety. We've talked about helping people to come forward and speak up when there's a problem, and therefore the improved communication skills that everybody has to have in order to do that. We've talked about education. We've talked about identifying red flags early on. All of these things are what we need in order to be able to have hybrid working. We need to have improved communication. We need to have improved psychological safety. So many places at the moment are concerned about cultural drift, where their teams don't feel like teams, or how do we bring in trainee solicitors and help them to learn when they're not learning by osmosis? Everything needs to be more considered, more deliberate, and more communicable. And that is where we need to start. So it's creating the opportunities for interaction, for crossover, and for everything that we need that we would normally have in an office in a hybrid environment. So instead of everybody just sitting in their silos with their heads down doing their work, it's having those bring out the dead meetings. It's having those stand up and wrap up meetings. It's having the, okay, I know you're busy, but we need to have some CPD because otherwise you're going to do all of it at the end of the year and it's not going to help. So we're going to do an hour here. We're going to do a half hour there. It's making it fit. It's saying, okay, we can't do everything the same way as we did in the office, but how can we get the essence of it and still perform it? On the training point, I saw exactly the same thing. When I was doing training for a firm that had a very large conveyancing firm, my feedback scores went because even just sitting out for an hour and doing something around well-being and burnout, they were not in a position to be able to learn, be able to engage with it at that point. So what do? You make it flexible, you make it supportive. I've even gotten to the point where I'm breaking down hour-long trainings into 10-minute chunks, because psychologically I cannot comprehend the idea of listening to something for an hour. All of you who have stayed with us throughout this, you're brilliant.
Yes.
But breaking things down to make it more accessible, more easy. So we increase communication, we increase the accessibility, which as law firms we're not great at doing anyway. And we then say we need the essence, but we need to deliver it in a different way. So instead of getting the bells and the whistles and 15 more tech solutions for people to understand, let's do the things that work so people can use them.
I think that's I mean, we have a Slack channel and we have Teams and we have, collaboration on the same documents and all of that kind of stuff.
They all have their purpose, but it's making sure that we're not overwhelmed, that it's not just a massive wall of user guides, and that they add value. I don't think we're great at assessing added value. We're great at picking the ball up, going, run, and then just running and not figuring out if we are kind of doing a Wile E. Coyote and running off the cliff at some point. So we need to have that reflection constantly. Is this adding value?
And I think that I'm 4 years into running a remote only business. So we do actually have an office. We do have some people in it. But prior to COVID, everybody was scattered and everybody worked on site and things like this. And some things that I've really learned on that journey, because the opposite way around, actually. I always had remote people. But I think when I moved from working in an office to having a remote team, there was some really like first principles that I learned. Putting meetings in and sticking to them is one of the most important things that we can keep coming back to. When we root cause analysis why something hasn't happened, something hasn't worked, it's usually because a meeting's been missed, because people are like, oh, I've got children off today, and if you let these meetings drift, the problems will drift with them. So for us, I think it's making sure. And so when I'm coming to supervision and file reviewing, it's a needle in a haystack as it is. If you're not doing it, you're not even in the haystack, you don't even know. For me, I'd be thinking about how do we really make sure that we facilitate those one-to-one meetings. We've lost the water cooler moments often. That's one of the benefits of having instant messaging, but people who are not used to instant messaging do find it quite intrusive and quite stressful, and being people just getting in touch at the drop of a hat, and wanting help, and you've got a day's worth of stuff already to do. So putting those meetings in and sticking to the supervision meetings. Also, what I would say is it's an opportunity, if you're thinking about hybrid work and you're thinking about your compliance, to really reevaluate which bits of it's done by who and who should be doing it. And many firms now, I think, have split up quite a lot of the compliance monitoring of file reviewing away from the very expensive supervision time, and are having administrators or people in a central team looking at the compliance. Better still, we do have a lot of technology that can help us with looking at it. And I think, to your point, Leah, about you used to be able to see, such a lot of supervisors over the years have said to me, well, you can see them, you can see the files piling up behind the desk, or you can see them struggling hear them struggling on a phone call, or you can see that they're just staring into space, not knowing what to do. You have people at home, you're not seeing any of that. So for me, I think one of the things to be looking at is the data that you have available to you. It's data that you probably have for financial hygiene. So you're looking at WIP, and you're looking at debtor days and all kinds of stuff that you're looking at on financial hygiene. That financial hygiene information, though, will often tell you inactive files. It will tell you if someone's caseload is bigger than you'd expect. It'll tell you if files are taking longer to do, and it will also tell you whether the WIP is higher or lower than you would expect it to be for a case that's that long. This is all data you've got that you don't have to look at someone's face to know they're not coping if 70% of their files haven't got any work done on them, or because you're getting emails from them at 7 in the morning, at 10 at night, and they're still not hitting the billing target. There's a lot of clues in there to know who to pick up the phone to and go, are you okay? And I think that would take you a long way to narrowing down your needle in a haystack search to getting the help where it's needed.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at your estimates for how long files should take and whether actually you're profitable on them if they're running on fixed fee. Looking at what the write-off is if people are doing hourly rate work. Looking at the file day progress and whether they are red, green, amber. You know, I started with a system that literally we input the files, we had an idea of what stage they should be at and on what date, and we were told they were black, red, amber, green. And that right there, just a very simple tally, told you who was progressing files and who had the healthy files and who had the fraud caseload. I started in personal injury. So, but that's the kind of thing that we need, and actually is there. It's just we've not really relied on it because we've relied on seeing what people are doing. The other side of it as well, I speak to a lot of trainee solicitors and a lot of junior lawyers who are terrified to pick up the phone to their managers because they're used to. So if you remember that mother-in-law blog that came out in the Law Gazette, where she talked about her trainee solicitor interrupting her and feeling frustrated because she had too much to do. A lot of trainee solicitors will spend their time at their desk waiting and looking for a moment. They'll see when you're about to go to the loo, they'll see when you're coming back from a cup of coffee and intervene. And they're not in a position where they feel confident enough necessarily or self-assured enough to be able to say, hey, I need some help with this, or I'm going to leave you this email because it's like a post-it note on your screen, please can you come back to me when you can. And they forget that actually it's their supervisor's job to help them to qualify, that tens of thousands of pounds are being invested in them and we all want them to succeed, but they're too closeted with the fear to actually speak up. And so again, it's that cultural point, it's that communication point, it's that signaling point every step of the way, every step.
So one of the things I've always observed about being a solicitor, you know, the day you get the badge, you know, you've already invested, especially these days, talking about trainees, have invested having to pay for university themselves, largely having to pay for the LPC themselves. They are, you know, there's no grants like there was in my day. You know, you are 60, 70 grand in debt by this point. It is the most important thing in your life because you've gambled your whole future on it, your whole financial security on getting this. The stakes were already high enough when you had the badge because you're 24/7, having to behave in a certain way, having to have these duties to people. And then you add that kind of investment on the top. There is huge amount of pressure that I think that many of us that are qualified or long qualified or in supervisor or leadership roles in law firms will never have had that much pressure. It wasn't easy when I became a solicitor, but it wasn't that hard. I had maybe 15 grand of debt or something, maybe 20, but certainly not, you know, half a house worth of debt before I could even entertain getting on a housing ladder, you know. So one of the things that we see quite a lot, I know we've talked about this loads, Leah, is the junior end of the profession. And the amount of disciplinary cases that we see where mistakes have been made by junior lawyers. And when we look at them, Leah and I, we're like, well, what was going on that person, you know, the decision of the tribunal or the SRA is that they're dishonest and they should exit the profession. But when I've spoken to people who've been in this situation, yes, they've had a moment where they've done something, backdated a document, lied to somebody about the progress of a matter, these kinds of things. But I have to ask what is going on in the background, because, you know, is it because they weren't able to speak up? This immense pressure on saying I can't cope has led people to think that a better idea is to do something which is essentially dishonest than say I can't cope. And I think it's a problem that we have to confront in the sector, and we have to think about proactively how to protect what are essentially, you know, this is their first job potentially, and there's such a lot of high stakes on it. It's a pressure cooker for people making those mistakes. I can see how somebody would think, why am I going to get myself out of this? They're not thinking rationally when you've got 70 grand worth of investment on it and you don't know if you're going to keep your job because nobody's told you that everyone makes mistakes. I mean, I remember the first circumstance I had to notify, was absolutely terrified, and if this has happened to you, you have my sympathies. I wanted the ground to open up and swallow me because I'd failed at my fundamental duty, which was to help clients, and I'd made it a bit worse because of something I'd done, or in fact not done. And I wanted to take the badge off me. I wanted them to just kind of confirm my fears that someone was going to say you're not good enough to be a solicitor. And I went along to the partner who's my managing me. She said, oh, don't worry, I've got 2 over there. 2 things she's had to, you know, it was like a secret club, and we need to stop it being secret, I think, for people to know that people make mistakes. It's okay to say that.
Yeah, exactly. I remember I had started at a firm, and this is shortly after I qualified. I picked up a file and I then reviewed it a couple of days later and went, oh my God, have I missed limitation? Now, I'd only been there for about 5 minutes at this point. So the idea that I was like, oh my God, I missed limitation was, in hindsight, ridiculous. But I was terrified. And the walk down to my partner in charge's office was the longest 30 steps of my
Oh my
life.
God, I
I
know.
walked in, can I have a conversation? I shut the door. I started tearing up, and he was like, oh my God, are you quitting? And I was like, I think I've missed the limitation. He was like, all right, let's deal with it. And his response was, if I'm not open and honest, if I'm not going to basically put my arm around you and say, there's nothing we can't fix, there's nothing we can't sort out, as long as we know, you're never going to come to me again. And we need that open environment. We have all been in compliance. We have all had, I've had more, being a contentious probate lawyer, I've had more meetings with compliance than most people have had hot dinners, because there's always something that could go wrong. And no word of a lie, I once got a phone call from counsel who told me, you are going to lose. The other side are going to win, but not for the reason they think they're going to win. Actually, neither of you knew that there was a case that was reported in a book that went out of print in the 90s, but I've bought a copy of the book online. So you're losing, but you didn't know why. And I'm thinking, well, in those circumstances, how could I ever shame myself for not knowing? There is always something you don't know. There is always a precedent somewhere. There is always a form somewhere that no one happened to tell you about. There's always a nice little thing in the system that makes it run quicker that you then find out about 3 years in and think, I could throttle you all for not telling me this for the last 3 years. There's always going to be something. And again, if we've got that open-minded approach of there is always something that could go wrong that I either didn't know, didn't think about, or wasn't within my control, all I can do is do the best I can with the skills and resources I've got and be open and honest and have those discussions. But I don't think a lot of trainee solicitors and a lot of junior lawyers necessarily have gotten to that point yet, because we're older and we've been through it and we're more sanguine about it. They're at the high roller table every single time, and it's on a knife edge. It's our job as people who have been in the industry for longer to get them down off the edge of the cliff, to make them realize it's not a cliff edge situation. It's not a knife edge situation every time. There is nothing we can't fix. We are literal problem fixers. We are professional problem fixers. And if you think that we can't sort something out, we can't make it better, we can't make sure that it's okay, so long as you're open and honest, then you don't have enough faith in us. That's our job.
Yeah, I completely agree. Now, I'm so conscious of time. We did say to Search UK we could be here all day, but I'm conscious you've made time to listen to us, and we're really grateful for you doing that. If people have tuned in today, I imagine that there's, I don't know who's tuned in today, but if people have tuned in today who are in management roles in law firms and wanting to help the people that work with them with these issues, they can see that there's inevitably this pressure cooker and people are struggling. What would you say to them? And then also, what would you say to individuals who are feeling that I feel a little bit powerless in the business that I'm in to get them to do something about it? What can I do for myself in relation to that? So first, businesses, what would they do? What could they do to help their people?
There are a million and one things we can do right now, but the biggest
Yeah,
thing
we've
that
got
any
3
of them...
minutes.
Okay, fine. Oh, she's limiting me again. The biggest thing that we can do in businesses is to say, none of us are going to get it right. Now is the opportunity for us to discuss what went wrong and how we can do it better. Every single time we make a mistake, we're going to learn and grow from it. Embed that culture, make that part of the practice, make it happen right now, and demonstrate to people that we can bring this back and we can do this in a healthy and manageable way. Get the training in, get the external advisors in, so that you can rebuild any trust and support that has been lost over this period of time, because inevitably it will have done. We're all under volume and stress. Bring people in so that you can start actually rebuilding that culture. It will have drifted.
And if you're feeling that you've got burnout and you just don't think you can go into work and they're going to help you, what can you do personally? Speak to you.
This is what I do. Speak to me. Speak to a friend. It is, whatever we've got in our heads is never as bad as it is in reality. And the problem we have is a lot of us are living in those 3 a.m. file moments. We're all living in that fear and that worry, and oh, nobody else is as rubbish as me and everybody else is brilliant and I should just go and eat worms. We all think that way. Speak to a friend, speak to me, speak to Amy, speak to somebody, just so it's not in your head. Then from there is nothing that we can't sort out.
100%, 100%. And I mean, I say this to people. I've been working with Leah for the last year. This is not a plug for her, but I think that if I'd have found Leah when I was that new solicitor, you know, I you know, had a number of issues and left fee earning ultimately, because I didn't have that support, whether that was support from the business or support that I found myself. I think there's a lot of people who could be thinking at the moment, I'm done with the law, I'm done with it, because of this particular period you've been through. And I think, you know, there's such a lot of talent in the sector that we risk losing because of this very difficult position that we've been through. And so getting yourself some coaching and just seeing things in a different way. You know, I know you won't mind me saying this, Leah, but you know, it's none of it's rocket science, but it's more perspective. Yeah. And when you are feeling burnt out and you are feeling scared about your own security, perspective is the first thing to go often. And that's why I think sharing it with somebody else. And like I said, if you can find someone in your business where you know, and this is why I'm so open about my personal mental health, because the amount of people after I was ill and I didn't make a secret of it, who came along and said, oh God, Amy, I'm in the same boat and yep. I didn't realise. And I think that as the main message for me is, you know, 1 in 4 lawyers every year could have a reportable circumstance, as in something's gone wrong that they didn't mean for it to go wrong. It is so common, or every lawyer once every 4 years, whichever way you want to chop the stats up. But it's talking to people and finding people to talk to. So yes, I'm always here. Leah's also always there. I know Leah, you've got lots of free resources and very accessible price resources for people to get some help.
We have to normalise this across the industry. We are individuals trying to do a hell of a lot of work for a lot of people and trying to do the best we can. We deserve support, full stop.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for everyone who stayed on. I hope you found it useful. Hope we've given you some practical tips. And if nothing else, made you feel that if you're feeling things are a bit hard, that's completely normal. It makes sense. But there is something to be done about it. You can find Leah. Both of us are on LinkedIn. We're very busy on LinkedIn. So if you want to follow us and see what we talk about, you're very, very welcome. You can find out more about what Teal does in terms of helping firms build risk management strategies to support compliance and also to stop things going wrong. Ultimately, that's what compliance is. It's simply a framework to stop things going wrong. So you can find out about us at tealcompliance.com. You're searching for Serenity at
searching for serenity.co.uk at the moment.
But LinkedIn's probably the place you'll find us the easiest. So thanks for your time today. If there's anything, nobody asked any questions. If there's anything you do want to ask us, you find us on LinkedIn, send us a direct message and we'll be delighted to help you. And thank you so much to Searches UK for inviting us on today. And we hope to see you at some point in the future. Take care. Thanks, Leah.
Thank you very much.